Do you want to unlock the secrets to skyrocketing your e-commerce sales? I do. Then you've come to the right place. Today we're diving deep into the world of personalized checkout experiences with Peter Karpas, the CEO of Bold Commerce. Peter's a leading expert in revolutionizing the way online businesses connect with their customers, and he's here to share his insights on how you can optimize your checkout process for maximum impact. Get ready to learn how Bold Commerce is changing the game and how you can leverage their innovative solutions to boost your bottom line. Don't miss this insightful episode with the brilliant Peter Karpas, only on Talk Commerce. Talk Commerce is brought to you by Content Basis Social. Social media curated, scheduled, and posted by humans starting at $49 a month. Visit contentbasis.io to learn more.
You're listening to Talk Commerce. Subscribe and download at talk-commerce.com.
Welcome to this episode of Talk Commerce. Today I have Peter Karpas. He is the CEO of Bold Commerce. Peter, go ahead, do an introduction for yourself. Tell us your day-to-day role and one of your passions in life.
I am the CEO of Bold Commerce. We do checkout, right? And we revolutionize checkout. My background is more from the payment side, other than the last few years where I've been doing e-commerce. I came from PayPal and First Data before I was part of Fiserv, and I spent over a decade into it, and even working with the payments division there. And so, that's my background and my passions in life. Well, right now I think we have to talk about hockey. Got to talk about hockey because we're heading into the playoffs, and my Warriors lost last night, so it's a little bit harder to get excited about basketball. And so, but look, I am the entertainment industry's dream consumer. And I do sports, I play video games, I read a lot, I listen to music. And so my passion is pretty much anything that I find entertaining. And I try to do a lot of it.
Yeah, I'm very embarrassed to admit I come from Minnesota, and I don't follow hockey. I kind of gave it up in 1991 or 92 when the North Stars moved to Dallas. And now, of course, we have a team again, and they just seem to continually do bad. It's a story of Minnesota sports.
Yes.
I have.
Unfortunately, although if we want to talk about bad, I am a San Jose Sharks fan, and I think they've had the second worst season since the 80s this year.
Okay.
And so we could talk about bad, but it's still fun.
Right.
Yeah.
It's definitely
you root for the kids who are getting better, and
and I know you're from the Bay Area, and you're losing the A's, which is, I don't know if it's good or bad for you. What's your opinion on the A's?
I never went to an A's game because the Coliseum wasn't great and it was so far. And so, I have been to a few of the Giants games. I think anytime a fan base loses a team, it's a sad thing.
Yes, very sad. All right, well, we're not here to talk about sports, but we are going to talk about Bold Commerce, and I'm excited to talk about that. But before we start, you did volunteer to be part of the Free Joke Project. So I'm going to tell you a joke, just say, should the joke be free or paid for it? And I think you had a good way to look at it, too. Like, this could be a conversion rate optimization on the joke. Maybe you should just get weeded out completely. All right, so here we go. A man walked into a hardware store and picked up a can of fly spray. "Is this good for wasps?" he asked the assistant. To which she replies, "No, it kills them."
Okay, so should that be free or paid for? And so the before, when we were talking about this, I said, well, I think a great joke that makes lots of people laugh should be free because it increases the total amount of happiness in the world. That one I think should be paid for.
All right, that's awesome. I love the way that you looked at that. Okay,
and so. I think, and now I have to, can I throw one back at you?
Absolutely. I love it.
Okay,
Go for it.
This is one of my favorite short jokes, which is two peanuts were walking across the street. One was assaulted.
That was good. I'm going to use that one in the future. I don't know if I
there
can.
You go.
Yeah, there we go. That's free. Yeah.
It's terrible, but, again, should it be free or paid for? Probably paid for.
That's my kind of joke. Absolutely. All right. Bold Commerce. I know that we kind of framed this in the very beginning in the green room as generic checkout. but tell us some background on Bold Commerce and how it got to where it's at.
Yeah, so Bold started as one of Shopify's top app developers, and in particularly in the subscriptions market. And one of the things that the company found, this is before my time there, was that basically checkout itself, right? So if you think about subscriptions, to do subscriptions right, you are changing checkout. You're changing how checkout works. You are changing all things about checkout. And so what they figured out was that basically checkout in e-commerce for the most part is totally broken, and that there's a real opportunity to go fix it. And so the company has evolved. We still have some great Shopify apps, and we love our Shopify division, and it does very well. But the focus of the company now is clearly on how do we help e-commerce solve the checkout problem, which, let's face it, it could use a lot of help.
Peter, I think, one of the things that I've seen is merchants are so afraid to do anything in checkout. Tell us a little bit about Bold and how it is kind of bridging that gap.
Yeah. So look, the big issue is most of the platform checkouts are, we call it, they're rigid and they're brittle. And they're rigid from the standpoint of you can't make that many changes. And the obvious example here is how many checkout flows do most brands have? And the answer is almost always one, maybe two, which is just crazy, right? Like, I mean, it's crazy because they would never accept that on any other part of their site, right? Every other part of their site, they are personalizing, and there are tons of different variations based off of how they personalize their site. But in checkout, it's, I have my one checkout flow. Or have my, maybe I have two, or maybe I'm really, good in that I have, sort of a one page that then gets CSS optimized for mobile kind of a thing, right? Like, right. And that's because the ability to configure it is low. And then of course there's the massive worry that it just breaks. And you and I'm certain, like, just because in our day-to-day shopping, it is amazing how often sort of the frustration of actually like completing checkout is because it just breaks on people. But that's the brittle aspect. And Bold solves both of those problems in a very real way. But, fundamentally, that's the current issue with checkout, is how rigid and brittle it is across all of the different merchants using all the different platforms.
I know you started on Shopify, and Shopify a long time ago didn't give you much of a choice at all for checkout. Did Bold come out of that idea that, when now Shopify Plus, it lets you to modify the checkout finally? And I mean, there couldn't have been anybody more rigid than Shopify in the very beginning, right?
Yeah, even Shopify today is quite rigid. I mean, you use our checkout flow. Maybe they allow you to add some components, right? So you can swap in a loyalty, or you can swap in a thing, but it's fundamentally a single checkout flow. That checkout flow is not personalized in any way whatsoever based off of what you know about the customer, right? And so even Shopify is very much we have one checkout flow. This is the checkout flow. It is the best checkout flow. We will tell you it is the best checkout flow. Which, again, no merchant on any other part of their site would accept that thinking or that rationale, right? But we do on checkout.
Yeah. So, I mean, I like the idea of flows. We met in Shop Talk, and you talked a little bit about the A/B testing that you can do in flows, and how people don't do A/B testing at all in checkout.
Sure.
And you don't. So, I mean, it is sort of like unknown data that you don't know because you never do it, because you're so afraid that something's going to happen, but you don't do it, and you're missing out on so many opportunities. Tell us a little bit about how flows help that.
Yeah. So let's just give two examples of how people should be personalizing their checkout but aren't. Right. So the first example I love to use is last year at Shop Talk, I was talking to a brand, pretty sizable, close to 100 websites globally. They had a technical problem with Apple Pay. And so they had to actually take it down. Revenue went up. Now think about that for a second. Revenue went up. And of course, the immediate question is, well, why? And of course, I asked that question, and his answer was because average order value went up. So this was a brand who had some relatively clear cross-sells and upsells, and basically the singular focus on conversion, because everybody's been in some ways brainwashed into thinking that checkout is all about conversion, when it's not. There's the checkout power trio, and the checkout power trio is conversion, average order value, and lifetime value. And those are three interconnected dials. And when you turn one, it impacts the other two, right? And so basically they've been so focused on conversion that they didn't realize that the super slickness of conversion was hurting their ability to upsell and cross-sell. And that because of what they were selling, consumers actually wanted that, weren't going anywhere. And so that they could worry a little bit less about conversion and focus more on cross-sell and upsell. And so then we continued to talk about it, and they had fixed the technical problem, and they were in the middle of an internal debate about, do they turn it back on? Which is, of course, completely the wrong question. Because the right question, which they would have asked for every other part of their site, is who do they turn it back on for? Which they don't ask, right? Because this is checkout. We don't personalize checkout. And so that's one easy example. And then the other example is, basically, I'll just sort of continue on the cross-sell and upsell theme. Nobody wants to ship $10 of anything for the most part, right? And so fundamentally, if somebody has $10 in the cart, you want to show them an upsell, and then maybe a cross-sell, and then maybe another cross-sell, and then maybe another cross-sell until they have $35, $50 in the cart. However, if they have $1,000 in the cart, you don't want to show them any of that, right? And so the question is, again, how do you personalize your checkout? So based off of the dollar value they have in the cart, an average order value size, right? Or just a straight up order value size. It's not an average, but an order value size, right? You should be showing them different. That is the concept of having different checkout flows personalized based off of the signals that you choose. And that's what Bold enables.
And so Bold is more than just checkout now, though. You do a number of different things. Tell us a little bit about Bold and how it fits in with the merchant.
Yeah. So again, we are a composable and headless checkout. We really think of ourselves as just checkout. We don't do payment. We work well with the PayPals and the Stripes and the Adyens and the Authorizes of the world, right? And so what we do is we swap out the checkout component of your e-commerce stack. And so, and we do that, by the way, for everybody other than Shopify, because Shopify won't allow it. But for pretty much anybody else, we can, look, if you think through the e-commerce stack, it has a bunch of different components in it, right? You've got your order management system, you've got your content management system, you've got all these other sort of things. And with the rise of Mock and really the ideas behind Mock, the idea that really everything is becoming composable. That's what composable means, is I can swap out my content management system. So rather than using the default content management system that the platform has, I can use a different content management system. We are doing just the exact same thing for checkout. Rather than using the default checkout for the platform, all right, or a custom build, if you have a sort of a custom build, we swap that out with Bold checkout. And that's our focus. And then we enable as many flows as you want. We enable the integration of shipping and taxes. And that actually sort of leads to why we're not brittle. And we can get into that later if you'd like, and if you think it'd be interesting to the audience, but because it gets, sort of technical around how do you do this without being brittle, right? And that is sort of due to the unique architecture we have. But fundamentally, that's what we do.
I know one thing you had mentioned at Shop Talk, and this is where I was going with my previous question, is that you are really a checkout platform, and you're unique in that space. There's not a lot of other vendors that are just doing checkout as a service, right?
Yes. Yeah. So people always ask who are our competitors. And when I was at Intuit, one of the great things was people would be like, who competes with TurboTax and QuickBooks? And aside from the other obvious big ones like a Block, really the answer when I was there, which was in the 2000s, was paper and pencil. We were competing against paper, and it's awesome to compete against paper and pencil because paper and pencil does not have a marketing arm or a lobby, right? And for us, it's very similar. We don't have any real. We are, as far as we can tell, the only composable checkout that is not part of a platform. Right. And so our competitors are the equivalent of paper and pencil, which is the default checkout parts of the platform. Right. And we, sort of swap them out. And because we only focus on checkout, we can make a better one. Right. And sort of enable. And so that's how I think about but yes, we are creating a category because there aren't many other composable checkouts, right? There are like the payment checkout. Everybody sort of like talks about payment checkout, but we're a platform level checkout, right? Which means that we do everything that a platform checkout is expected to do, which is all of the integrations, upsell and cross sell, right? And so, it's funny. I said earlier, I'm a longtime payments person. The word checkout is a problem now, in the same way that POS is a problem for payments people. So in the payments world, when you talk about POS, you have to say, well, am I talking about the physical terminal in the store? Like the thing that actually allows people to tap a card or swipe a card, right? That's a POS. Or are you talking about the software that runs the whole restaurant? That's also POS. And so the word POS has little meaning, or at least a very broad meaning now. Checkout is the same way. Lots of people use checkout in very broad ways. Whenever I talk to payments people, I'm like, we integrate with payment checkout. Like payment checkout integrates into platform checkout. We are a platform level checkout, and we do everything that you would expect a platform level checkout does, of which the easiest example is upsell and cross-sell.
Yeah, I want to present an argument that I would hear from a merchant when I used to run an agency, and every merchant is so afraid of checkout, but they aren't afraid of their payment gateway.
Yeah.
And if you think about the relationship of checkout and payment gateway, if your payment gateway is down, you're down, right? So
yes,
talk about is that a valid argument or it's not a valid argument. I'm being, but talk about that juxtaposition between the two and how merchants overlook the fact that all the processes of that checkout are outbound APIs to fulfill the order, even the outbound checkout, even the outbound fulfillment to an ERP. But they don't work on the actual part of checkout that's the most important. Nobody cares if you're authorized.net or PayPal or Braintree or whatever. They care about is the experience they have in checkout.
Yes, right. And so that's the thing. So whenever I talk to payment people, I'm like, what does your checkout plug into? And if you think of it that way, right, what it plugs into is the checkout module of the merchant's platform, right? And so it starts there. And you won't ever hear me say, well, that checkout isn't important. It is a very important part of the process, right? Like, does the credit card get approved? How does that work? Like how slick is it? And the rise of like the one-click checkouts and the pre-filling of forms and sort of all that, that's great. But there's all ton of stuff that happens outside of just the payment part of checkout, which again is the platform level of checkout. Upsell, cross-sell, I've mentioned a bunch of times already in sort of in this. But if you think through shipping integrations and tax integrations and injection into the order management system, right, you've got sort of like all these aspects of it, a large part of which is, what is the flow? When do you ask somebody to log in? Do you ask somebody to log in? Which payment buttons do I even show? Right? I mean, right now we're heading towards a button war, and even beyond the button war, now the next war that we're going to have is who owns the guest email field. So between Shop Pay and PayPal Fastlane and Stripe Link and Mastercard's Click to Pay, and I could keep going, right? All of them want to own that guest email field and be the first one you call. And so how do you know which is the first one? How do you know which one is more effective? Like that happens before you ever get to the payment level checkout, right? And so questions like that are things. And the reason why people don't test that is because typically today you integrate with all of these, right? You integrate with your payments, you integrate with your shipping, you integrate with your taxes, you integrate with sort of all this. Then if you want to create a second checkout flow or a third checkout flow, you have to reintegrate all of those things. And that's why it's brittle. That's why people are afraid of, because every time they create a new checkout flow, if they have to reintegrate, all of a sudden that is error prone. And when they make a change, they now have to make a change twice, right? For each checkout flow, if they're only doing checkout flows, or if they have 3 checkout flows, they have to make that change 3 times, right? This is, I said, the unique architecture for Bold, right? The unique architecture for Bold is you plug in everything once, and then the way we're architected is you can create as many checkout flows as you want. Once you're then, sort of like you can reuse those integrations. And it's just a fundamental architectural, when you really get into it, it's deep technology, which nobody wants to hear about in a podcast. But the result of it is I'm only going to have one checkout flow because I don't want to reintegrate everything. Right. And that holds merchants back from making real money. And that was, the thing is that was true a few years ago, but now with composable commerce, it no longer has to be true. And people have to get over the learned helplessness because it's learned helplessness.
I want to walk through a scenario, and I'll try to do this as quickly as possible, but I consulted with a client who wanted to allow their customers to do reorders. So they had their account section turned off. They only allowed guest checkout, which meant that nobody could reorder anything, which meant they just had the account section turned off, all the things down the line. And I said, why don't you give some incentives for people to actually create an account? But they were so afraid of that abandoned cart, that lost person at the end, that they were so reluctant to do that. But some of the things are forcing them, if they wanted to do a program or loyalty, all these other things that you need to. Talk a little bit about how you would help in that situation in terms of how to get customers through the process quicker, and is there a reason to be afraid of making them put their address in as a real customer for reordering?
Well, look, like in every other part of the site, for every other part of their site, they would have said, let's just A/B test this, right? Let's just, because you don't know the answer there, right? Am I going to make more money if I encourage people to log in and sort of sign in, or am I going to, and this comes back to why it cannot just be about conversion, right? Conversion is myopic, right? It is the power trio. It is the checkout power trio: conversion, average order value, lifetime value. And so given that it's those three things, the question there was, well, do I give up conversion because I'm going to gain in lifetime value or my average order value? And the only way to really know that is to test it. And in order to test it, I have to be able to build multiple checkout flows. All right. And I have to have a plugin, like the actual testing, like they all have testing engines today, right? This is how they personalize the rest of their site, right? But again, nobody does this in checkout because the capability of doing it for the most part is limited. Until companies like Bold, right, sort of enable the sort of full A/B testing. And so, like, for that, it isn't go do this and then because it's risky, right? It's go test this so that you can learn which is going to maximize your business, right? And that's how I would talk to them sort of about it, which is you have to build the capability to A/B test checkout just like you A/B test everything else.
Yeah, and I'll add one more part to that. Because a lot of customers may use something like VWO to do the A/B testing, where they can inject some code to make it look different. They find something that works, but they don't know that it might not work for somebody else, right? So you A/B tested, now you've done, well, B works better, but A is never available, and C and D are not even on the cards. They could be in the future, but once you've figured out that the new B works, right, then you've switched and there's no capability in that checkout to give somebody a different path to go down, knowing that they work this way, right? So, I mean, I think that from the guest checkout, there should be a different version of checkout for guest than there would be for registered. And maybe you want to make it like even less friction for somebody that's registered, right?
Yeah, well, or the interesting thing is actually more friction, because you know that they're a customer and they're not going anywhere. So why aren't you throwing in an upsell, right? Or a cross-sell? Why aren't you trying to get them to sign up for your loyalty points, sort of program or some other program, right? Like, one of my favorite examples of this is, have you ever gotten a business card printed? It's at like Vistaprint.
Yeah.
Right. So in Vistaprint does an amazing thing, right? Which is their checkout is like 30 minutes long, right? Because, right, you've already put in the time to design your business card. They know you're not going anywhere. And so they do a series, like they are not solving for conversion at that point. They are trying to sell you the poster. They're trying to sell you the signs. They're trying to sell you every other design that they can. Higher quality business cards, quantities of business cards, right? Like, do you want to, put something on the back of the business card? Like they know their business. Right. And so that's an extreme example, because I think they literally do something like 5 to 10 upsells and cross sells, maybe even more. Right. Because they know you're not going anywhere. And so in the case of it's a returning customer, they like you. they're likely not going anywhere. So why wouldn't you actually potentially lower the conversion dial a little bit in order to maximize the average order value and lifetime value dial? But the only way to know it is to test it.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a good point. And I mean, that really drills down to what marketing is about. And marketing is about not just trying different things, but actually testing to see which one works the best, right?
Right. Right. For who? Right. It's again, it comes back to for who. And going all the way back to that story about Apple Pay. I'm certain that there are some customers they should be showing Apple Pay to. And I'm also certain that there are other customers that they shouldn't, based off of that story, right? And then now the challenge is just let's figure out who's who, right? And that's how I'm going to maximize the business. And this is real money to the merchants. Like it is likely, because we've run the math, right? It is likely bigger than trying to maximize their ad, sort of return on ad spend, right? Like the investment here is so clear and easy because they're already in checkout, right? But again, for the most part, it's learned helplessness, and people are afraid of the rigid and brittle when they don't have to be anymore.
All right, so we have a few minutes still to go here. One of the I was part of a PayPal program in the late 2000s that that helped to streamline mobile checkouts, or just mobile conversion optimization, they called it. And they didn't do flows, but they did experiments that would help merchants determine what worked better than other. And you gave the example of the Apple Pay. Do you have any other examples like that seem counterintuitive to what would happen in checkout?
Oh, well, there are tons, right? And it all comes around to, like shipping options is another one, right? What shipping options do you show? What don't you show? Right? Can be sort of fascinating. And a lot of that is, or even personalizing it. If you have a physical stores in addition to e-commerce, right? Like a lot of people will just, hey, they're on e-commerce, I'm going to show shipping results. But actually they should be showing a try box, which is pick up in store today, or delivery, or shipping. And the impact of something like that, as simple as that, can be far bigger than you expect, because again, you don't really want to be shipping if they're willing to pick up in store. And if they're willing to go to a store, what else are they going to buy when they're in the store? And so the surprise there was not, oh, well, yeah, that makes sense. The surprise there was the size of the increase and how much more money you can make if you can get somebody to pick up in store. But of course, if somebody isn't within 20 miles of one of your stores, you probably don't want to show them pick up in store, right? Because that now hurts your conversion, right? And so again, it's all these details like that. The amount of, I think the other big, really surprising thing is the amount of upsells and cross sells people are willing to accept. I think people are worried, let me do one cross sell and then get out kind of a thing. And I think what we are seeing is that is just simply not true, right? By the way, you want to know what the number one cross sell item is? A second of the thing they've already bought.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
Right? I was surprised when I heard that. I was like, really? But no. Like, you should literally do a cross sell of the thing that's in their cart.
Right. That
surprised me. Right? But, when you start experimenting in checkout, there's all sorts of things you can learn.
That worked. I have 2 Model Ys. I'm joking. Let's just kind of close things out. What are do you have any predictions for 2024 on what we should be looking for in terms of e-commerce in general?
Yeah, I think the big thing, and I think we both, I'd be shocked if you didn't feel this at Shop Talk like I did, was the rise of composable, even outside of sort of like everybody seems to be talking about mock. And for those who are listening might not know what mock is, MACH. It is a movement, and it is also sort of a group of companies who enable best in breed solutions. And really the end result of mock can be very interesting around, how do platforms play? How do agencies play in terms of stitching together these best of breed solutions, right? Like, can you just now create your own platform really easy that is specific to you using best of breed? And that's all coming, kind of a thing. And when people talk about like AI, and really that's the code generation, the code generation AI tools will really accelerate that work in a very interesting way. And there's some agencies who are doing some very interesting experiments with AI code generation tools to do the stitching together kind of a thing. But I think there's little question that 2024, the fact that the Mach 3 conference is in the US is, I think, indicative of just, it's amazing how many companies are doing composable, moving to composable if you're a retailer or a merchant. And it just, everybody's talking about composable. And so that's a prediction. It's a pretty easy prediction to make. But it's just like the wave. You can see the wave, and it's kind of fun to be part of it, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think some people are a little afraid of the composable part of it because they think it adds some complication. But I think that Bold will easily swap in with most shopping carts, right? It's not a big heavy lift, and there's no redeployment, or there may be one deployment if you're on Magento, but there's not a continually, you don't have to redeploy multiple different systems.
Now, for Magento, it's an extension you install, right? Like, and so, but even outside of Bold, right? Because, whenever anybody asks me a question like that, I try not to make it specific to Bold. It's just in every other category. Again, when you look at the e-commerce platform stack, right? Content management, search, order management, like it's all going composable. Right. And these best of breed solutions are doing really amazing things. Right. And so you can see that movement, and it's fascinating.
Peter, that's as we close out the podcast, I give everybody a chance to do a shameless plug about anything they like. What would you like to plug today?
Look, the shameless plug is go to boldcommerce.com or reach out to me. I'm not that hard to find, or my team. Every merchant of any size at this point should be personalizing their checkout. It is the easiest investment decision they could be making, and they just need to know, here's the plug, right? You don't have learned helplessness. You need to know that it is possible. It is doable. It is doable in weeks and months, not quarters and years, right? And basically the changes you make go straight to the bottom line. And so that's my shameless.
That's awesome. Peter Karpas is the CEO of Bold Commerce. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Talk Commerce is a production of Content Basis LLC. For more creative content, go to contentbasis.io.